Go back where you came from. Immigrants are taking all of our jobs. They are lowering the wages. They are a burden on our infrastructure. If you've spent any amount of time online, you've probably heard statements like these. Maybe you've heard much worse, but you've probably heard the exact opposite as well. America was built by immigrants. Immigrants drive innovation. Immigrants start businesses. And that's what fascinates me the most. How can the same group of people be viewed in such completely opposite ways? How can one person look at immigrants and see a threat, while another looks at immigrants and see opportunity? Well, despite all this disagreement, there's one thing that almost everyone seems to agree on. Most people want the best immigrants. The immigrants who start a business, the immigrant who create jobs, the immigrant who discovers a cure for a disease, the immigrant who contributes more than they take. So why don't the US just let the best immigrant in? The moment you try to answer this question, you run into a surprisingly difficult problem. How do you know what's the best immigrant? How do you identify the future entrepreneur before they've built the company, the future scientist before they've made the discovery, the future innovator before they've created anything at all? And that's where this entire conversation takes a fascinating turn, because hidden underneath the immigration debate is a much more generic problem. The generic problem is, how do you identify extraordinary potential before it becomes obvious? As it turns out, some of the smartest people in the world have been trying to solve this exact problem for decades. They're called venture capitalists. Yes, their job sounds deceptively simple. Find the next Google, Amazon, Nvidia, the next billion-dollar company before anyone else does. And if anyone should be good at spotting extraordinary potential, it should be them. After all, they have teams of analysts, access to data, years of experience, and billions of dollars on the line. But here's what's fascinating. Even the best venture capitalists in the world get it wrong all the time. Most startups fail. Many investments go nowhere. And yet, venture capital remains one of the most profitable industries on earth. How is that possible? The answer lies in a very strange mathematical law called the power law. In most areas of life, we intuitively expect results to be distributed somewhat evenly. But in venture capital, that's not the case. A tiny number of companies create a massive percentage of all the returns. One investment might return more money than the other 20 investments combined. Think about it. Thousands of startups were founded around the same time as Google. Thousands more existed alongside Amazon. Yet, only a handful became world-changing companies. And here's the most important part. Nobody knew which companies those would be beforehand. Looking back, the winners seem obvious. Looking forward, they would be just like everyone else. The future Google looked like a small startup. The future Amazon looked like a risky experiment. The future Nvidia looked like just any other company in a crowded market. The extraordinary looked ordinary, and that's when I realized something. Immigration may have the same exact problem. Think about it. When people talk about immigration, they often speak as if identifying the best immigrant should be easy, as if future success is something you can simply measure on a form. But was Sergey Brin obviously going to help create Google when he arrived in America as a child? Was the next groundbreaking scientist obviously a future scientist when they first landed at an airport? Was the future entrepreneur obviously an entrepreneur before they started a company? Of course not. Just like startups, people don't arrive with their future attached to them. The extraordinary looks ordinary, and that's what makes immigration so fascinating, because immigration is ultimately a bet on human potential. Every immigrant arrives with a story that hasn't been written yet. Some will struggle, most will live ordinary, productive lives, and a small number will go on to create an outstanding impact on society. They'll build companies, create jobs, develop life-saving technologies, make scientific discoveries, or raise children who will do. The challenge is that nobody knows beforehand who those people will be. Not economists, not immigration officers, and definitely not politicians. And that's where I think both sides of the immigration debate often talk past each other. One side sees the immigrants who struggle and asks whether immigration is worth it. The other side points to the extraordinary success stories and celebrates immigration's benefits. But both sides are looking at outcomes, they're looking backward. Their real challenge has always been looking forward, because looking backward is easy. Everybody knows Google and Amazon were great investments. Everybody knows that successful immigrant stories, but before the success happened, before the company was built, before the discovery was made, before the jobs are created, the future looked uncertain. That's the part we tend to forget, and maybe that's the deeper lesson here. This isn't really a story about immigration. It's a story about the limits of prediction, about how difficult it is to recognize potential before it becomes an achievement, about how the people who eventually change the world rarely look extraordinary at the beginning of their journey. The future founders looks ordinary, the future scientists look ordinary, the future innovators look ordinary, the future success stories look ordinary. And that's why the question isn't as simple as, why don't we only let in the best immigrants? It's because the people who eventually become the best immigrants often don't look like the best immigrants when they first arrive.